I don't see him, but I'm going to welcome. I give you the next leader of the Pierre Poilievre!
Good to see you.
Thank you.
I see MP Richard Bragdon is here, folks. He's in the house.
Thank you very much to the great Jake Stewart. Everybody give him a round of applause. Last time I was in New Brunswick, I arrived at the airport and Jake said, you know, the first thing we have to do is go visit our seniors who built this country. And so he took me to a seniors home and Jake said, you're going to be a very big star here. I said, wow. So I went in and I walked up to a lady and I said, do you know who I am? She said, no, but if you ask the nurse, she'll tell you who you are. It's good to be made humble from time to time, eh? And, you know, it also reminds me of the great Tilly O'Neill Gordon, member of Parliament from Miramichi, predecessor to Jake. And she was a wise member of Parliament. When I was just 25 years old, in the Parliament, making lots of noise, giving too many speeches, saying more than I should have. Prime Minister Harper said to her, maybe you could sit this young man down and talk some sense to him. A quiet moment of prayer. And you know, get him to stop talking so much, as young men often do. And so she brought me into her office, and she had on the wall a fish that she had caught in the Miramichi. And she just pointed up to it and she said, Pierre, you see that fish? If he kept his mouth shut, he'd still be alive. In politics, there's when all is said and done, there's often a lot more said than done. But not the case with Jake Stewart, a great champion of his community, both provincially and federally. He was always prepared to take a strong stand, even when it wasn't popular with people in power. He's always prepared to stand up and speak up for the people he represents, to defend the First Nations right across New Brunswick. And I sat with him on the Finance Committee, where he was the critic responsible for the Canada Revenue Agency. Now, in the old legend of Robin Hood, and the Sheriff of Nottingham was the tax collector. So the critic of CRA is then necessarily Robin Hood. So we have our very own Robin Hood. And I'm glad to see my friend Richard Bragdon, a wonderful member of Parliament, a man of great integrity. Thank you very much for being here as well, Richard. Mark Twain once said that the two most important days in your life are the day that you're born and the day you find out why you were born. Why? Why is the most important question we must ask whenever we do anything. So why am I running for Prime Minister? The answer is that people feel like they've lost control of their lives in this country. You know, we came here as immigrants over hundreds of years, always for the same reason, for freedom, to take control of our lives, to do what we wanted with our own destinies. In fact, the great Wilfrid Laurier said, Canada's free, and freedom is its nationality. But lately, people have not felt so free. Whether you're the 14-year-old suffering from depression after 2 years separated from sporting and social activities, the small businessman who mortgaged his house to start a business only to have it shut so many times he could not reopen it. Or maybe you're the hardworking and fearless truck driver who delivered goods and services across the border over 2 years without a vaccine, only to suddenly have your job stripped away from you by a prime minister who accused you of wanting to spread a virus, even though you're alone in a truck all day, in contact with no one. And ladies and gentlemen, I've met countless people who've been separated from loved ones, who've lost their livelihoods and their paychecks because of a personal medical decision that they made for their own reasons. And ladies and gentlemen, this is wrong. It has gone too far, and that is why we must fight tooth and nail to put a permanent end to this. Just medical freedoms people feel like they have lost. It's their economic freedoms. You might be the single mom skipping meals so that your kids don't have to. Or you might be like Mark, the welder in St. John's, Newfoundland, who told me he's taping up his work boots to cover up the holes because he can no longer afford to replace them, even though he works as a licensed welder all day, 6 days a week. Or maybe you're the 32-year-old living in your parents' basement because you can't afford housing now that prices have doubled over the last 7 years. Why is this happening? Well, the cost of government is driving up the cost of living. Inflationary deficits have sent more dollars bidding up the price of existing goods. Inflationary taxes have made it more expensive for businesses to make those goods. The more government spends, the more things cost. It's just inflation, isn't it? It's just inflation. So what are we going to do about it? We've got to reverse what caused the inflation in the first place. We've got to eliminate the inflationary deficits by getting back to a balanced budget. Here's how. Trudeau's announced $100 billion of new supplementary spending above and beyond the core budget for our services. We can't afford to pile that new cost on the backs of our consumers and taxpayers. I will cancel that $100 billion expenditure. Then there's the, then there's the infrastructure bank, $35 billion infrastructure bank. Now, obviously we need infrastructure, but we don't need another bank. We've got lots of banks. What's this bank supposed to do? Well, give bonuses to its executives and give loan guarantees to the large multinational corporations so that in the event that the project is profitable, they keep the money, but in the event that they go over budget, we pay the price. I believe in the free market. You do a good job, you should make a profit. But that if a big corporation goes over budget, they should pay the price for that, not taxpayers, and that's why I will axe the infrastructure bank altogether. And we're going to save $1 billion by defunding the CBC. Got its mind made up on that one. We're also going to run the government's finances the way you run your own. If you decide to make an extra expenditure, you find the savings within your budget to pay for it. Thomas Sowell, the great economist, said that the number one rule of economics is scarcity. People always want more than there is to have. And the number one rule of politics is to ignore the number one rule of economics, right? All the species of the universe, the microbe on the ground, the birds in the trees, the fish in the seas, have to deal with scarcity, maximize the use of limited resources. Every creature except the politician, because he just passes on the cost to everyone else through higher taxes, debt, and inflation. And we're seeing that right now through the inflationary policies of this government. So what's the solution to that? Well, we're going to pass the pay-as-you-go law, and it requires the government find $1 of savings for every additional dollar of spending that is not budgeted for. That'll cap the cost of government. That'll cap the cost of government so that people can afford what they're paying for, and we can allow the economy to catch up with the spending from the politicians that it must support. They did this in the United States back in the 1990s, they managed to balance their budget for the only time since I've been born and pay off $400 billion of debt. And then when Congress let this law lapse, they went right back into deficit, which proves you need legal limits on politicians' spending. You've been pinching your pennies long enough. It's time for politicians to start pinching their pennies. Our central bank back to doing its core job, right? The job of the central bank was to target inflation at 2%. Right now it's at 6.8%, more than 3 times above. That's why people can't afford food, gas, or groceries. They can't afford a house over their head. Too many dollars chasing too few goods always leads to higher prices. If you've got an economy with 10 loaves of bread, and $10, it's $1 for each loaf. But if you double the number of dollars to 20, you keep the same 10 loaves of bread, well then it's $2 for each loaf of bread. That's what's happening right now. We bid up the price of goods because there's $400 billion additional dollars in circulation in the Canadian economy today. 1 in every $5 that exists in Canada was created in the last 2 years. No wonder the price of everything is inflating. We need to get our central bank back to its core mandate of targeting inflation at 2%, not by inflating the prices in order to fund Justin Trudeau's spending. And so I will give the Auditor General the power to audit all of the transactions of the central bank to make sure they are in the public interest and make sure that they serve the goal of keeping inflation low. And I will replace the existing governor with a new governor who will keep inflation low, protect the purchasing power of your dollar and your paycheck. Ironically, the central bank now says it needs more power. It wants to create something called a digital currency, a central bank digital currency that would allow you, that would have you deposit your money in a government bank account. Anybody trust the government with your bank account? No, we don't need it. We don't want it. You should have the freedom to choose any bank you want and to control your own money. And you should have the ability to actually transact without having the government surveil you, or well, without having the risk that one day a government or a politician might abuse that power by rewarding friends' bank accounts, punishing enemies, or freezing accounts altogether, as they did with the abuse of the Emergency Act. So I will end the idea of a central bank. The other reason it's so expensive is the carbon tax, right? The liberal carbon tax, which drives up the cost first and foremost of gas, diesel, home heating, but then secondarily of everything that must be transported by truck or heated by our fuel. And that's why it's so expensive. Now over $2 a liter in many parts of the country. I met a working guy from Northern Ontario who cannot afford to fill up his truck to drive and see his dying parents one last time in Thunder Bay because it is too expensive to pay for fuel. Now this is an area where we have disagreement. Jean Charest brought in the carbon tax in Quebec. He also increased the gas tax and the sales tax. Patrick Brown endorsed the carbon tax when he was briefly leader of the Conservative Party of Ontario. I disagree. I have always been against the carbon tax, and a Poilievre government will axe the carbon tax. We need to produce more of our energy here in Canada, right? Isn't it crazy? We are importing 130,000 barrels of overseas oil every single day in this country. It is crazy to think that we're bringing in oil from abroad, sending our paychecks to other countries, and we have the 3rd biggest supply of oil on planet Earth right here in Canada. So how are we going to fix that? Well, one, I'm going to axe the anti-energy law, Bill C-69, so we can build projects. Approve pipelines, build Canadian pipelines for Canadians. today have been delivering 1 million barrels of oil over to the Europeans so that they can break their dependence on Putin if we had the Energy East pipeline right now, right? And I'm going to sign off on Newfoundland's plan to increase its output by 400,000 barrels a day to fully replace all of the overseas oil that we're bringing in New Brunswick, and within 5 years we will ban dictator oil from Canada altogether. We're going to unleash the production of the 1,300 trillion cubic feet of natural gas in this country. You know, back in 2015, there were about 15 or 20 projects proposed. Not a single one of them has been built. We have a number of major advantages here in Canada. We want to shift to Europe. The closest point in North America to Europe is Newfoundland. If we want to ship to Asia, the closest point in North America is British Columbia. So we have a shipping advantage over our competitors down in the US Gulf Coast. We have another advantage. How do you get the natural gas to liquefy so you can put it on a ship? Anybody know? Cold weather. What do we have in Canada? Cold weather is our #1 natural resource in Canada, right? It was so cold last winter, there were even some Liberals seen with hands in their own pockets. We're going to allow our cold weather, our shorter shipping distances. We're going to produce the natural gas here in Canada, cool it down to -161 degrees Celsius, shrink it in volume by 600 times so it fits on a ship. We're going to send it to Asia so that they can use our gas to replace their dirty coal-fired plant and protect the environment. We're going to send it to Europe to break the dependence on Putin. We're going to transform dollars for dictators into paychecks for our people in this country. I'm going to ban my ministers from attending the World Economic Forum altogether. So that we can get more homes in this country. Do you know that we have the fewest homes per capita of any country in the G7, even though we have the most land to build upon? It's crazy. That's why house prices are so high. And the reason is that we have these government gatekeepers that block construction. $250,000 of the cost of every home in Toronto is just government regulation and taxes. Now, the cost of that is now spilling over as Torontonians have to go further and further out. Many of them are then bidding up prices in other parts of the country. Vancouver, the cost of government in one unit of housing is $650,000 for one unit of housing. So here's what I'm going to do. For big city politicians, I'm going to tie the number of infrastructure dollars they get to the number of houses that actually get built. So they have an incentive to remove the government gatekeepers, make building permits cheap and fast so we can build more homes for our young people, and we're going to sell off 15% of the 37,000 underutilized federal buildings so that they can be converted into housing, and the sale of those buildings can be converted into proceeds to help pay off our deficit. It's a win-win-win. Yes, it warms my heart to think of all the wonderful families that will be pulling up in their U-Haul, taking their belongings into their beautiful new homes inside the former headquarters of the CBC in downtown Toronto. And then there's the gatekeepers that try to control our speech, right? We see and say online. The woke warriors who are now in power in the government of Canada, who have passed C-11, A bill that would allow the bureaucracy to determine what shows up in your Facebook news feed, for example. They also want to create someone called a digital safety commissioner with the ability to take things off the internet. Not things that are criminal. Things that are criminal already get you in jail, even if you do them on the internet. This is stuff, these are thought crimes that the government is going after. If you're expressing a viewpoint that the government doesn't like, it wants to silence you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not about protecting Canadians, it's about protecting the powerful against criticism. That's the real goal here. That's why Twitter actually sent a letter to the government and said, if you pass these bills, Canada will be alone in having these kinds of controls on the internet, but for 3 other countries on earth: Iran, North Korea, and communist China. I don't know about you, but that's not the kind of company that I want to be keeping, right? So, you know, Section 2B of our charter guarantees the freedom of expression. As Shakespeare would say, to be or not to be? That is the question. Here's my answer. I will repeal the censorship laws and reinstate freedom of expression for all Canadians. Do this without you. Democracy never comes from above. It's always a bottom-up exercise. Ever since the signing of the great Magna Carta in the year 1215, the commoners forced King John to sign on to the rights that we have now today in that great charter. Were the original freedoms. The right to a trial by jury, no arrest without charge, no taxation without representation, no confiscation without compensation, and countless other freedoms that are embedded in our legal and democratic system all started because the commoners forced them on the king, who bowed before them and signed them in the fields of Runnymede. Why is the House of Commons green? Well, because the first commoners came from the fields, right? Donc c'était dans le champ que les gens se sont battus pour préserver et pour obtenir les libertés que nous prenons pour acquis. Is that Justin Trudeau calling? Tell him I'm busy talking to more important people right now, okay? Yeah, you know, he was probably calling to tell you all not to buy your party memberships, right? That's the last thing he wants you to do, because he knows if you have a party membership before this Friday, you'll be eligible to vote in the leadership race. If you don't have your membership by Friday, you can't vote. Are you going to get your memberships, my friends? Don't leave today. Would you be my security guard? Okay, she's my, what's your name? This is Sharon, everybody. Sharon, if Sharon finds any of you trying to sneak out of here without your membership, she's going to tackle you to the ground, okay? So don't even think about it. Sign up today. You can do it on my website. Like I said, freedom comes from the bottom up, never the top down. It is a contract between the dead, the living, and the yet to be born. The living generations must stand up and defend freedom whenever it is threatened, and preserve it for future generations by taking action today, here, and now. I need you. J'ai besoin de vous pour le faire. Je ne peux pas le faire seul. I need you as part of my team to join this cause, to join this party, to vote for me to become Conservative leader, so that I can take on and defeat Justin Trudeau in the and so that we can put you back in charge of your life by making Canada the freest nation on earth, in the words of the great Canadian Prime Minister John Diefenbaker. I am a Canadian, a free Canadian. Free to speak without fear, free to stand for what I think right, free to oppose what I believe wrong, free free to worship God in my own way. Free to choose those who shall govern my country is this heritage of freedom that I pledge to uphold for myself and for all of mankind. Thank you very much, everybody.
All right, everyone. How was that? Who's the next Prime Minister of Canada? That's right. Okay.
Thank you.
This
Thank
is very
you.
important.
Thank you.
Don't
Very
leave
much.
now. At the back corner, you're going to see a table with a bunch of Pierre for Prime Minister photos in the back. Everyone in here is welcome to get your photograph taken with Pierre, lined up along the perimeter. Also, at the table.